So you're calling today for reversal of the trend for longer prison sentences. Tell us why.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the programme this morning. Our position is very clear. We have increased the prison population, and it is promised to increase by a very substantial proportion over the next few years. And we need to stand back and work out, are we using our resources properly? We think there is an urgent need for a review of what has happened over the last 20 years to get everything back to a proper sense of proportion.
Well, yes, you talk about a proper sense of proportion, but to what extent have sentences got longer and why has it happened?
I think there are two reasons for it. First of all, we have been changing sentencing legislation on and off over the last 15 to 20 years without really looking at the effect as a whole. For example, the sentences for murder were significantly increased. People have been required to spend longer of the sentence in prison. And all of these have a cumulative or other effect. And you need to stand back and ask yourselves, have we got the resources balanced correctly? Has the increase in sentencing reduced crime? Has it had the right effect? And secondly, if you have prisons that are overcrowded, they cannot be used and cannot function as intended, namely to provide places of rehabilitation. And so we have a system that isn't, as a result of what has happened, not working properly.
There's the issue of punishment, isn't there, when it comes to prison sentences? But some might argue there's the issue of deterrent as well. Do longer sentences provide a deterrent effect?
There is not that much evidence of that. What's much more important, and I think this is shown by what has happened very recently in respect of the riots, is getting people tried quickly. Now, if you devote a significant proportion or over significant proportion of the resources available to the criminal justice system to keeping people in prison, you necessarily, because there's no latitude within the budget, have a position where you aren't able to try people quickly enough. And you absolutely need to be able to do that, as was shown by what happened during these riots and those when I was a judge back in 2011. Speed is critical.
Your intervention comes at this time of prison overcrowding, and just a week before, about 1,500 people are expected to be released from prison under an emergency measure which reduces from 50% to 40% the proportion of custodial sentence to be served in prison for some on certain sentences. Do you have any concerns about that move?
Well, it is an inevitability that the Secretary of State for Justice has had to do this. But the difficulty we face is that on current prison projections and the difficulty with resources, this is likely to be a recurring problem. What we're saying is, let us stand back, let us look at the cumulative effect of what has happened and work out a more sensible and a more thought through use of resources to prevent crime, to reduce offending, and to rehabilitate those in prison. The current system is not working, and the Secretary of State should not, whatever the causes, be faced with the current crisis.
The Prison Minister, Lord Timpson, has said that a third of prisoners shouldn't be there. Do you agree?
Well, I do. He is quite right. We have not looked properly at the integration of various aspects of mental health, much better with the way the prison service works. We haven't looked at what can be done with certain categories of offenders to see them effectively maybe given short sentences, then when released, given the necessary underpinning so they can come back and operate and work as proper members of society. This needs money. Now, I would be delighted if the government was to say there were vast additional resources open to the criminal justice system. But I think many would say that I was dreaming if that was likely to be the case, given the current pressures on resources across the board. And what we say is this: we've got into a position of sentence inflation. Stop, think, and take measures to reverse this and use the resources more sensibly.
We only have about 20 seconds, but very briefly, reports today that Estonia has offered to rent out prison capacity to the UK. Is that something we should take them up on?
I would regard this as really good evidence of what's wrong. I mean, it's sending prisoners to a country that is a fairish distance away and not always inexpensive to get at means you cut prisoners off from what is critical to them, which is seeing and being in touch with their families. This is a measure of last resort. It's much better to do this than, say, for example, to let dangerous people out.